I'm Lauren Sercu. I'm the co-founder of Sorenson Impact Advisory, which is a multifamily office that's dedicated to building impact portfolios for families and institutions. Our anchor client is the Sorenson Impact Foundation. Jim Sorenson is sitting in the room. Thank you for all that you do for this space. And I'm so thrilled to be here with Stephen DeBerry. Stephen is the founder of Bronze VC, which is an early stage venture capital fund that is focused on transforming disparity to prosperity. And we are proud investors in Stephen's fund. Stephen has an incredible background, so I've had to pick really wisely what I share with this group. But if you'll indulge me, I want to give a little bit of Stephen's bio. Stephen earned a bachelor's degree in anthropology with highest honors from UCLA, as well as a master's in social anthropology and an MBA from the University of Oxford. He's a British Marshall Scholar, a Henry Crown Fellow at the Aspen Institute, and he's been recognized for his community engagement right here at Yerba Buena Center for the Arts. Currently a visiting scholar at the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, and both Ebony Magazine and the Washington Post have called him one of the 100 most powerful African Americans in the United States. Fun fact, before becoming an investor, Stephen was a champion athlete. He's a former USA National Track and Field champion, 400-meter hurdles, and a member of the first African-American mountaineering team to ascend Denali, the highest mountain in North America. So a multifaceted human being that we have. Investor is just one of the many facets that we're going to explore today. But I want to start this conversation off, Stephen, with just, you were here at the first SOCAP. And I think SOCAP back then was not this production. Couple of stools, couple of mission-driven visionaries. Tell us, what did impact investing mean to you in those early days? And what, since that time, have we gotten right, and what are we still working through?
Well, you guys hear me? Yep?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I first just want to say thank you for having me here. I get to speak on a fair amount of things, and it's the polite thing to say, like, thank you for having me, but like, really, it feels like coming home. And in our prep, we had like a note or two, and then normally you would do the get ready for the thing call. I was like, no, we're good, like, because we already have such a great relationship, and like, you're one of our favorites, and so genuinely, really, I'm always grateful. Don't tell them people, but I'm extra grateful to be here. Is the point. So
likewise.
Thank you. And yes, I was at the very first SOCAP, and I would say that entire meeting was probably about the size of this room, literally. And there were not two, maybe four, not chairs, but stools. And like, that was the production. And it was a bunch of, this motley crew having the discussion about this, at the time, radical idea of being able to use commercial capital to drive social impact. And it was a mixture of folks that were coming, as it still is, a mixture of folks coming from the full range of capital, from, pure philanthropy all the way to entirely commercial orientation. And I would say, to answer the question, the thing that we got right there was just pushing on the edges and being willing to be creative and think about new ways to do things, and having a fundamental commitment to impact. So that has not changed. That's foundational and shouldn't change. Yeah. I think along the way, one of the things that we've struggled with is language, and we still struggle with it. More specifically, I'm a linguistic anthropologist, so I should have figured this out for all of us, and I haven't, because it's tough, it's nuanced, and I think, I was at the meeting at the Bellagio where everyone was like, oh, we'll call this thing impact investing. Yes, that's what it is, it's impact investing. And now still, it's 2025, however many years later, a couple decades later, And I'm still encountering, we just opened up our fundraise for our third fund. And so I'm talking to a lot of other investors and LPs right now. And this theme is still coming up. Well, what do you say? Do you tell them your impact? Do you tell them that you care? And it's not just investment managers, it's not just LPs, it's the entrepreneurs that we back. And I will tell you that there are many entrepreneurs in our portfolio and even more outside of our portfolio who, I'll be at some cocktail party or something and they'll kind of take me in the corner and they'll tell, like, actually, I'm really impacty, but I don't tell my investors, but I can tell you because I know you're down with that kind of thing. You know what I mean? And I'm like, I totally am, and I joke, but it's both frustrating, not that people feel that they can't come out as impact investors in a full-throated sort of way and then like claim it, because there's obviously nothing wrong with loving our society, wanting to save the planet, taking care of each other. Like there's 0% of any of that feels like something that we can be ashamed of. And at the same time, there's this sense in the market, for people who, for very good reasons, they're doing the work that is going to feed their families, so to feel like claiming that adds additional risk to the endeavors that allow us to take care of the ones we love is just fundamentally broken. So I still think we have a lot of work to do on that one.
Well, we're going to circle back to more reflections on SOCAP and impact investing, but for now, I want to bring everyone in to your thesis. You have a thesis that we were very compelled by. I think impact and financial outcomes are incredibly intertwined in your thesis, but tell us a little bit about, your work that led to developing what you call your Eastside investment thesis. Give us the history and how it works in practice.
Yeah, happy to do that. So, rewind almost 2 decades ago, and I was living in East Palo Alto, here in the Bay Area, which, if you don't know it, East Palo Alto is a town that's near Stanford. Palo Alto is on one side of the freeway, East Palo Alto is on the other. There's a massive disparity on pretty much every dimension you could imagine. Housing prices, crime, access to water, grocery store access, just you name it. Like pick an indice of quality of life, and it's like night and day. And it turned out that the less favorable indices were on the east side of the freeway in East Palo Alto. And I'd moved there intentionally. Before that, I was living in Australia. I came back to the Bay Area to work at a research lab, and I had not seen another black person for a year because I live in Australia. So I came here to the Bay. I didn't know anything. I was like, oh, my people, and it was funny because I went back to my lab where I was working, and people were like, oh, Stephen, you can't do that. It's dangerous there. And so that was one of the things that really struck me. And I committed to myself that I was going to live there until there was a grocery store. So I went there. There was not. It took 10 years for that to happen. But during that time, I was on the board of a foundation that was focusing on 14 communities in California, all lower income communities. And I was sitting at my desk one day, and I was looking at a list of the communities, and I realized the list was like East Oakland and East Salinas and East LA, and and I was sitting in East Palo Alto, and that was the moment that it hit me, like there's something going on. Like, why is it that these lower income communities are disproportionately on the east side of places? Like, what is that all about? And I wrestled with this for probably 2 years. I couldn't figure it out until one day I did. And I realized that it had to do with wind. someone asked me, how did you figure that out? I honestly don't know. I don't know. Like, you know, but it makes sense, and it's been holding up. So I didn't bring the videos, but basically the idea is if you were to look at the globe from the top, if you look at the North Pole, the direction that it would be spinning is counterclockwise, right? And if you turn that to the lateral aspect, you'd see it rotating like this, which means that the wind, which goes in the same direction as the rotation of the Earth, goes from west to east. And the way that I explain that mattering to us is, imagine that it's freezing cold outside. And there are 10 of us stranded in the mountains, let's say. And to survive the night, we've got to huddle around a campfire. The riddle is, which of the 10 of us is going to sit with the wind blowing smoke in our face all night, which would be unpleasant, unhealthy, lots of things, right? And the solution to that riddle, historically, at the community level, has been like people with less power, right? And that's what has been happening in communities like East Palo Alto and East Oakland and East Philly and East Baltimore, East New York, New Orleans East. This is true in the east side of Vancouver and Paris and East London, East Jerusalem, Bombay, Shanghai. Like, it's a global phenomenon. And still, you know, I started talking about this, I don't know, close to a decade ago. And still, if I give talks at a campus or something like that, I'd say 85% of the time someone goes, oh, that's just like, they say East something or other that I've never heard of. It's a very persistent pattern. So to me, that was anthropologically interesting, but you know, as an investor, what was more, and a design person, like what was more interesting to me was a better answer to that riddle, rather than just saying, oh, well, somebody's got to catch a bullet so the rest of us can be comfortable. Like, that's just intellectually lazy, and like from a design perspective, it's just gross, it's sloppy. Like, we can do better. And so I realized that there is actually a better solution to that riddle, which I think is also poetic, and that is just get closer to each other and sit in a horseshoe. And that way no one has the wind blowing in their, or smoke blowing in their face. And the thing that is important about this solution is it doesn't cost us anything to do it. And that's the important part of the Eastside thesis. You know, the bigger point that relates to our economy is there are a bunch of very elegant solutions to our social, economic, and environmental problems that will cost us nothing. In fact, they're economically accretive. And so if it doesn't cost us anything and they're economically accretive, then let's just do that. So that's what we've been doing. We started our first fund at Bronze with that Eastside thesis, saying we're going to look for these opportunities to identify disparities and find measurable ways to move those disparities to prosperity. And our belief is that we can do that. We can find economic growth in making that disparity to prosperity move. And it turns out it's worked. Our first fund was, you know, in venture capital, you want to be in the top quartile. That's kind of the magic mark. And so we made that in our first fund. I'm glad to share that we've been, you know, our team is getting better. Our chief of staff, Ren, is here. Raise your hand, Ren. She's awesome. Our second fund is performing in the top 5% of the U.S. venture capital asset class. And the reason that's important is because I think it at least makes a dent in this argument that you can't, you know, that impact is soft. Yeah. You know, that I was talking about the reason that, you know, managers, LPs are whispering the I word quietly in corners. You know, we are more full-throated about it. We are, you know, unapologetic about our commitment to impact. The last thing I will say, and this is maybe my small contribution to the language challenge that I mentioned earlier, is we have a very particular definition of what impact means because there are so many out there. But for us, we are crystal clear what it means, and that is that we're looking for investments where an incremental unit of revenue In other words, every time you make $1, incremental unit of revenue generates an incremental unit of impact. So said in plain English, if I was explaining this to my kids, I'd say, like, every time we make $1, we do some good. And ideally, the inverse is true, which is every time we do some good, it helps us make $1. So it's not just, it doesn't flow one way. It's actually, ideally, what you want is a business where both of those things are true. And it turns out, when you find that, that's magic. Like, this is our kind of, like, you know, our secret. I guess not a secret now, but, yeah.
Totally. Secret sauce. Yeah, I think your strategy has embodied so well. You know, we often get the question, you know, are you making your returns in spite of the impact? And our answer there is it's because of the impact. Like, investment strategies like yours, those two things are, you know, intertwined. I'd love for you to take us into your portfolio. You know, that your thesis is so compelling at a high level, but can you share some of the founders or businesses that you're most excited about that are driving your placement in the top quartiles of the venture capital indices?
Yeah.
Just
Happy to do that.
Pull back the curtain a little.
Yeah, sure. I'll give a couple of examples of founders that we're really excited about. So one of our companies is, it's in the business of reversing type 2 diabetes. That's where they started. And that resonated with me a lot just from lived experience, because I just mentioned I was living in a community that didn't have a grocery store. East Palo Alto today still, this is more than a decade after it got its grocery store. Still today, in the entire city of East Palo Alto, there are only 2 places you can eat with a metal knife and fork. Right now. In the middle of Silicon Valley. After, there's an anthropologist thing, after the greatest economic inflection in human history. There's all this tech boom. Like, if you were, 10 decades from now, and you were in my anthropology department, and you were looking back as an anthropologist and try to explain, like, how did you actually have a low-income community in the middle of all of this wealth creation at the epicenter of the Silicon Revolution? That zip code was poor. How did that even happen? It would be one of the great conundrums on, like, Future Discovery Channel or whatever. Yeah, how did that even happen? You know? So anyway, 2 places you can eat with a metal knife and fork. One of the consequences of that is, like, it's a food desert, so diabetes is off the chart. Here's the math on diabetes. These are old numbers, so they're bigger now, but old numbers, $400 billion a year we spend on managing diabetes. I say managing because the reversal rate is 0.4%, so around that, it's bupkis. You can't reverse it. That's what the medical establishment would have us believe, 0.4%. We found a company that has a 60% reversal rate, 6-0. So it's literally 150 times better than the medical standard of care. It doesn't use any pharmaceuticals, it doesn't use surgery. It's a digital medical clinic that you access through your phone. Yep. And the clinical intervention is putting your body into nutritional ketosis. So in other words, they make you eat really healthy, and your body does the rest. The thing is, it's hard for the first 3 weeks. It's so hard. And so this app and the community associated with it and the way that it increases the frequency with which you can be in touch with doctors helps folks get over that hump. And so after 8 weeks, 50% of folks, their blood A1C level drops below clinical definition of diabetes. Like, they just get rid of it. After 10 weeks, that inclines to 60%, and it stays there. So I talked about, aligning incremental revenue with incremental impact. This is a business where every time we have a shot at healing a person, that's where we get our revenue. There's a direct tie to that, 60% reversal rate. It's 150 times better than what we were doing. When we saw that, I was like, here, push in chips. Here, take some more. Like, how much will you take from us? We were one of the largest seed investors. I was being polite. We had a co-investor where the founder was an entrepreneur in residence at the firm. So they put in $50K more than us as a courtesy. But I was like, back up the truck, get this guy, that company, we're I don't know, 8 years later or something like that. It's well into unicorn status, and we expect that company will go public next year. And it's still growing probably, 50% plus a year. We think it can be a very, very large business. So that's one example. Fun. I have backstories. We love our founders. The backstory on this founder is he was an Ironman world champion. Not like did it. He won it. And that's actually how he started the business. The guy's a world-class athlete. But to compete, he was taking endurance supplements, like the gummies, all that. It's all sugar. So he became pre-diabetic. And so in an effort to heal himself, he found his now co-founder, a guy named Stephen Finney, who was running this clinic at Harvard that had this intervention. Sami, the founder, had built a company called, you may have used Trulia, a real estate app. He had built that before and taken it public, very large company. And they built Virta is the name of the company. So that's one. My second story, the backstory on this one this is Phaedra Ellis-Lampkins. Before she built what she's building now, she was Prince's manager, music manager. And I don't know if any of you remember, there was a period where Prince became the artist formerly known as Prince. You remember that? Does anyone know what that was about? The backstory on that? Listen close, I'm gonna give it to you. Do you know? Okay, well that's not fair. You already, yeah. I know her. She's, of course you know. Let me do my thing, man. I'm just no. So Prince wanted his masters, the master copies of his music back from the label. And the label was like, no. They didn't want to give it to him. And he said, in fact, not only are we not giving them to you, but by contract, you owe us another album. And with Phaedra's tutelage, his response was, I don't owe you another album. Prince owes you another album. I am the artist formerly known as Prince until I get my master's. And he got his master's back. Phaedra is a very astute negotiator, an incredible, one of the best entrepreneurs I've worked with. She's building a company called Promise. Promise started out as a business that was set up to just help people navigate municipal systems. Like you get a traffic ticket. I mean, a terrible example would be single mom gets a traffic ticket, loses the ticket, court date is issued, she never gets the notice or loses it, dog eats it, I don't know. Yeah. But for whatever reason, she doesn't show up for her court date. Now she's got a warrant for her arrest. She has no idea. She gets pulled over or somehow stopped by authorities. She's arrested. After she's arrested, her kids are left at school. Now, Child Protective Services are involved. This thing just snowballs and becomes the sort of scenario that just tanks someone's life unnecessarily over a traffic violation. Ridiculous. So Phaedra built a business to help courts, cities, all these systems interface with citizens and manage that sort of thing. And in the early days of the business, that business was growing. And I think this is a testament to Phaedra as a founder. I'm so impressed with her. She saw that while the business was growing, what was happening in practice was she was creating these economic efficiencies in some of the cities that she had as customers, and they were taking those savings and they were militarizing the police forces. And those forces were preying on the folks in the community. And she said, this is just absolutely not why we started this business. And so she had an early stage startup, venture backed, that was going high and to the right, growing all the things that the investors would want to see. And she said, this is not what we were built for. And she said, we're going to pivot the business. I remember she called and we talked it through. And we supported that, but man, I got to tell you, I don't know if you've ever built something. It's it's really hard to build anything that works. And the amount of courage that it takes to have something in hand that maybe you don't like it, but you know that it's going and you're probably going to get rich, you know, and to have the focus and patience and confidence to say, we're going to invent something new, and then do it is remarkable. But that's exactly what she did. So she pivoted Promise into a business that turns out to be way bigger. So they now build payment rails for government. And so you all might know businesses like Stripe, these massive businesses that those are consumer payment rails, like credit cards and all that. Turns out, when you look at the volume of transaction flows, you know, like not everyone has a credit card. Everyone pays taxes. The governmental flows dwarf consumer payment flows. And on the government side, they're way less efficient. So she's built a platform that facilitates that, both payment flows and also verification. So if you have government assistance of some kind, and you have to validate your identity, right now, the state of the art is you're validating over and over and over and over in what is often a very undignified process. Their platform allows folks to validate over your phone with text message in a really simple way. So they're streamlining the government, they're capturing a much larger market, and she was able to pivot into a business that was ethically aligned where she wanted to be. So really proud of our founders and the portfolio that we're building.
That's incredible. I love Phaedra's story and just how aligned of a founder she is. And
by the way, I just want to say,
Yeah.
Phaedra, she was last featured in Forbes. They have this list of like next billion companies. Her company's like just under $1 billion now. I mean, it's amazing to see the success of that business.
Yeah.
And I think it's one of many, many, many more examples that we have at our disposal now to support, you know, the conversation we were having before about impact being a source of advantage.
Totally. Yeah. Watching someone double down on impact, extending that J curve of the business, but then seeing a bigger inflection point is the best we can hope for. So, amazing. Well, tell us, you know, Stephen, we're always looking, there are tons of venture capital firms. I don't have to tell you that. We're always looking for competitive advantages. I think you do an amazing job surrounding yourself with competitive advantages. And one of those, you know, there are lots of venture funds whose models out there are, let's bring on venture partners, or let's bring on some experts to kind of help with our decision making, our sourcing. You've taken that a step further and built an entire community that you call the Eastside Alliance. Can you talk a little bit about the idea for that, how that what that group is, how that group support you, your portfolio companies?
Yeah. So I had a couple of insights from earlier in my career. I used to manage investment portfolios across asset classes, like for endowments, things like that. So I got to see a lot of things, a lot of patterns. And you see the gray hair, I've been around for a while too. So I've been through some economic cycles. And one of the things that I noticed, particularly coming out of technology, is networks tend to win. You know, networks are where the power and the leverage is. And so when we were building the early versions of Bronze, you know, I got to the part in the movie where like you start building the advisory board. And at first I was like, okay, who are the like 5 smartest people I can get to? And then I very quickly realized like, no, that's actually not it. Like I will take the 5 smartest folks that any of you would put up, and I'd put that against my average network. And I bet you I'll win. And the reason is because networks can grow. Networks can adapt. Networks can also be very efficient. So I tied that observation about network leverage with something I learned from my dad, who's a military officer. And he taught me about this method that is used for special forces teams. It's called task organization. And the philosophy of task organization is basically to be capable of everything. And to have a mechanism to identify the subset of relevant capabilities for any particular circumstance, assemble those capabilities, deploy them and activate them, and then recover them very efficiently. And so it's kind of like quarterbacking resources, you know. And I realized like, oh, okay, if we start out with even the network I have in my contact list, like, you know, if I could tap into what everyone's capable of, like any of us in our phone, like, do you know how powerful that is? Like, insane. And if you couple that with, you know, a disciplined way to, you know, assemble those folks, like brief them, you know, put them on a problem, activate them, and then put them back on the shelf, not only do you get an incredibly powerful mechanism to deliver impact, but it's insanely efficient. Because unlike, say, you know, like Andreessen Horowitz, I don't know what their budget is for their support teams. I mean, it's impressive, and they've got a huge platform. But they're paying all those folks. And so the economics of that system are far less efficient than what we have, because we are able to assess people's capabilities. And then when and only when there's a match between their capabilities, resources, insights, what have you, to a particular circumstance, that's when we activate them. And that's the point at which you can start crafting economics to make sure everyone's happy and motivated and performs. But you only do it when things are actually generating value instead of just paying to keep people around. So we're still small, it's still early days, but our bet is that over the long run, we are building a network-affected ecosystem that will just get better and better and better over time. And so, I don't know, I think about us versus Andreessen 20 years from now, 30 years from now, 50 years from now. You know, like we're not even a speck to them today, or the market at, you know, at full scale. But give us some time. I think we'll catch up.
I love that. Maybe to stick on competitive advantages, everyone, all of the managers in our portfolio, everyone here is talking about AI today. You were talking about AI a while ago. Well over 5 years ago. I was trying to go back and find in my email when this conversation was, but you were talking, indulge me in like a short story here, but you were, I remember this call distinctly. You were talking about this new analyst that you were adding to the Bronze platform. You were calling it the machine. Again, this is like well over 5 years ago. Speaking like an entirely different language, you're talking about feeding the machine, you're training the machine on sourcing, then feeding deal notes and training this machine and having it become an asset to the Bronze platform. In retrospect, you were the first manager in our portfolio to talk about AI in a way that was going to, you know, catapult your business and create a competitive advantage. What did you see then? What do you see now? And I think one of the big fears here when we think about AI for good is that, you know, AI could stand to have a material impact on perpetuating disparity. So how are you thinking about that in the context of what you're trying to accomplish?
Yeah. So I started my first company in 1995. It was about 2 weeks after Netscape went public. And I had just graduated from UCLA. I did not own a computer. I had access to computers in a computer lab. My girlfriend across town at USC had an even better computer lab. And so I'd sneak into her lab and like I taught myself HTML. And I started a web development company. And it was a similar moment in some ways because I could see then, I was like, this web thing is gonna change everything. And so I started this company that built websites, and I would explain to people, it's kind of like a phone book, but you can update it, and like, you know, I mean, it was very rudimentary. And I sold my first deal to a guy who, I was like, I tell you what, I'll configure your whole office. I'll buy the computers, I'll do that, because I didn't have a computer. So I bought his computers, I configured them, and I built his website on his computer, and that's how I got started, like ultimate bootstrap. I think back to that period because it was the last time that and I've spent my entire life in technology, but that moment was the last time I felt that there was as deep an inflection point, technically, as we are in now. I think the AI moment that we're in, I haven't seen anything like it since 1995. I saw this coming because, I said I came from a research lab background. I'm kind of like talking to the people who are literally building this stuff, like the developers who are building it. And I got that feeling in my stomach again. I was like, oh, it's game time. Like, this is about to go big. And so, yeah, it was, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years ago. I don't know, remember when it was. I mean, it's been kind of like a just slowly emerging thing for us. But we started recording our, like, pitch meetings or business calls or whatever, and just building a corpus of like, hey, can we make this thing understand my voice? And we started feeding it like our annual reports, quarterly letters, like anything that was like, okay, how do we think about what we do as a business? Fast forward to today, I think we've got a data advantage because we've been doing that so long. And there are many examples, but as an example, we're in our third generation of an internal AI that we've built. We call it SQN, SQN. It stands for the sequenon, like the things without which we couldn't do on our own. One of which, for example, is traditionally in venture, we get, I don't know what our number is these days off the top of my head, but it's many, many thousands of unsolicited pitches. And there's just no way that we could keep up with reading those, being thoughtful about them, responding, politely saying no, not making people hate us because we say no. Like, that's hard to do. Now we've trained Sequin to assess our deals as they come in. It understands our Eastside thesis. It understands how we assess them. We can take a pitch deck, give it to Sequin. It will very quickly give an analysis and feed it back to us with a radar chart that scores it on 8 dimensions and tells us, we think this is a 7.5 out of 10. It also tees up diligence questions. If you decide to take a call, I'd push here on market, their claim on this co-founder, we looked it up, I don't know, background, ask about this guy, so it is like a very good analyst for us that never gets tired and just runs on electrons. So we now have the capacity to assess essentially an infinite volume of deals, which we certainly could not do before. And I'll tell you I'm always looking for some kind of advantage that's going to compound over time. So, I've also been able to, worm our way into like Y Combinator or Plug and Play, some of the 2 largest accelerators in the world, and to try to get early looks at those deals. It turns out because we are very disciplined about our Eastside thesis, 80+% of those deals aren't for us. But now that we have Sequin, we're still assessing all of those deals. And so over time, one of the things that we'll be able to do is look back at the deals, even the ones that weren't for us, and just ask, how did those companies do? And how did we think they were going to do? And where were we wrong? And so over time, we will get smarter about picking deals because I certainly don't know everything. And the market will change. And I know from companies that we've invested in the past that are data heavy, sometimes there are signals that you just wouldn't even imagine correlate to outcomes. And so it's useful to have a system like that can pick those sorts of things up.
And keeping on AI for a minute, would love to just explore, I think we are at an inflection point, but how do you differentiate in a space that has very quickly gotten overhyped, overpriced? How are you seeing around corners? What are areas you're excited about within AI that may be overlooked by others?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, there are over 1,100 AI companies in the market right now. I mean, I don't think any single investor can make sense of it. Again, I'm grateful that I went through the web explosion because it was also similar, and just a lot of noise. Yeah. And there was a shakeout in that bubble. What I learned in that experience is, at the end of the day, the economy is here to serve people. That is the point of it. It's not all this like derivative stuff, all this abstract stuff that is self-serving, like intrinsically to itself, tends to decay over time. But basic human needs are basic human needs, man. Like, that's not gonna change, you know? We are the foundation of the economy. The economy is in service to us. And so we try to keep that in mind, and really the emerging thesis, sort of sub-thesis that we have now is, we talk about it as the response layer. You know, there are historically layers of the internet that make it work. And we think the highest layer of the technology stack now is a response layer, because the world that we live in right now, I mean, I have a lot of adjectives, and we're a polite company, but we will at least say it's complex, like more complex than it arguably has ever been. And that complexity has gotten to a point where it's at least hard, maybe impossible, to navigate it on our own. And so we need tools to figure out, you know, how do I optimize my savings? How do I optimize my, I mean, things you guys don't even think about probably, but like, you know, you use GPS to like navigate through, you know, transportation puzzles. There will be corollary tools that help us navigate shifts in policy, shifts in employment, you know, different economic, trading currencies, you know, finding safety, moving locations, insuring against catastrophe, you know, of all kinds. You know, these are the response layer tools that meet people where they are in you know, very, very practical ways. That's what we're looking for.
Yeah, very well said. And then I guess would love to just hear your perspectives. We've got a room full of folks who are investors, practitioners. We're working in this field. We're thinking about this all the time. What call to action would you give on more of a personal side in terms of, you know, ways you're thinking about making impact in the context of an environment that has a lot of headwinds for those of us who are practitioners in the space?
I would say two things. One is sort of market-oriented and one is completely not. So the market-oriented thing is that it's an observation, which is I think we're winning in ways that we're not getting credit for. I think the impact economy is growing. I think that, as evidenced by the many people who pull me into the corners and say the I word, and the people who are formerly corner whisperers who are now publicly, you know, coming out into the light and saying, like, this is something I care about. I will tell you, many of the best founders that we've backed, folks like Sami from Verta,
yeah.
This dude's last company was like $2+ billion. He could raise money from anyone he wanted to. He took money from Bronze. That was a choice. That was a conscious choice. And he's not singular in that. Yeah. The best founders in the market are good people. And they care, and they want to build things that matter. They want to build things that their children and their grandchildren will be proud that they built. And so, while I don't think you're going to hear this as much as it deserves to be discussed on CNBC, and the public markets are still figuring it out, I would just say, understand that we're in a process. You know, we're getting there. And, you know, like with our fund, we invest early stage. It takes 7, 10, maybe longer years before you figure out if we've won. But I'm telling you guys, I see the data. I'm looking at our portfolio. I'm looking at the market generally. We're winning. It's just going to take time, and we're going to keep winning. So stick to it. Keep building. Keep your head down, and do what we've been doing because it's working.
I love that.
Yeah.
It feels like a perfect place to end. We do have a couple of minutes to take a few questions from the audience. Rob, we got some mic running.
Uh-oh, he looks too eager. Call someone else.
Rob is
I don't know if I'm ready for all that.
Hey, are we on? Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Stephen, first of all, thank you very much for all of that really colorful and helpful history. I'm riffing here on your comment about Prince, who was born in 1958. In 1959, Ray Charles left Atlantic Records for that very same reason. He wanted his masters. 35 years later, Prince did his thing, and then Taylor Swift did her thing even more recently, right? Because she wanted ownership of her music. That's a long-winded way of saying if there was one thing that you would give advice about, where the thing is, don't do that, right, to an entrepreneur, or you have to do that. In other words, own your masters. What would it be?
So let's pull on the 1959 thread. In 1959, there was a revolution in Cuba. Cuba was getting petroleum imports from Russia. Those imports were blockaded. Cuba didn't have access to petroleum. That was meant to be a stranglehold on the economy. What happened as a result, though, was that Cuba started making innovations in their own chemical economy internally and started doing organic agriculture and aquaculture. And fast forward, we don't talk about it publicly, but a lot of the technologies that they developed feed through today to our organic economy here today. Totally oblique to your question.
That's okay, my question was oblique too.
But the reason I bring it up is because I don't, after being in the business for a reasonably long time, I think it's very hard to predict where innovation is going to come from or why. And for that reason, I struggle to tell founders that there's one thing that they should do or not do, other than remain curious and steadfastly focused on what it is they're trying to achieve. The ways they may get there are essentially infinite, and I don't feel like I'm smart enough to, dictate to anyone how they're going to get it done. But I do know that commitment to craft matters. I do know that, love of teammates and building a great team matters. And staying committed to a vision matters. The people that I've seen who have done those three things tend to win over time.
Thank you.
Well said. I think we have time for one more question, if we've got it. Shudar?
Hi, guys. First off, it's so wonderful to hear about your portfolio successes. We're spending a lot of time thinking about the ideology of a class of venture capitalists that don't believe that humans need to exist, that we can destroy this planet to terraform Mars. So this is a refreshing counterpoint. And I'm curious, I want to unpack where you think we're going in terms of the tech stack. I would love to hear, if you have time as well, on are we in an AI bubble or is it just natural vendor financing? But as I am working more and more with movement builders and organizers who are very scared of how their information is being shared with private technology companies that are not particularly best in class around requiring subpoenas or warrants from ICE or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, it begins to make me wonder how confidently you are investing in founders that are building the future pro-social tech stack, right? Obviously, you hail from, among other places in Midyar, they're trying, right? But right now, everyone I know is dependent on Meredith Whittaker and Brian's Signal. Signal is not designed to organize us. It is not designed for this moment. So if you were to be making a couple diligence bets on early tech that will allow us to communicate through this bumpy part of the arc, what would that look like, right? And I guess another way of asking it is it fair to say that digital privacy has become a product for the wealthy?
Mostly, yes. And what I would say is, I think if we actually pan the aperture, extend it out and pan back and just look at the arc of where technology is going, and if you think you're scared, confused now, it's going to get super weird in ways that I don't think we're talking about yet. I think right now, yes, we're totally in an AI bubble. It doesn't mean AI is not real, but there will be a correction and it'll keep moving. I think the AI discussion is taking up most of the oxygen in the room right now because it's something that we can all point to, we understand, we can log in, we're like, yeah, I'm doing that. I think there are two categories of innovation that we're talking far less about. One are innovations in bio. Anyone know Jaron Lanier? He's a research scientist at Microsoft. One of the smartest technologists that I know. I was in a meeting with him not long ago, and he was like, "Oh yeah, we'll be like tattooing, have tattoos that like grow plants on our bodies, like which is technically possible." And it's just like, yeah, I got to think more laterally. I got to hang out with this guy. I was like, yeah, I can do better. You know what I mean? But like that's totally something that is practical, actually, and like there's just a panoply of things like that are just weird and exciting and cool and innovative and scary. So that's one category. Another that we're not talking about is quantum computing. And back to the language problem that I was talking about earlier, I was at a TED conference, I think 2 years ago or something like that, and a couple of Google engineers came and they wheeled out their box and they talked about quantum computing, and the audience was just like, what? Because they were speaking engineer to a group of like human beings, and like no one understood what they were talking about. So I spent some time with them after and tried to like decode. This used to be my job when I was in the research lab. Like, what are you actually saying, dude? And here's what I took away from that conversation to help translate one of the, I think we shouldn't talk, or you don't need to talk about the mechanics of how quantum computers work. I think we need to relay to people the kinds of impacts that quantum computing can have. Here's one of the impacts that quantum computing could have on all of us that relates to your question, whether it's Signal or our banking. The entire cryptography regime that we use to secure everything on the internet breaks under a quantum scenario. So what do we do with that? Like, so today, yeah, definitely rich people have an advantage with security and other things. But we're moving towards a future where literally everything breaks. And in some ways that can be scary, but in other ways, I find this to be one of the most inspiring things that could happen to us. Because it means that we get to embrace that moment and we get a vote on what we build next. And we can choose to do that peacefully, and we can choose to do that beautifully, and we can choose to do that together in a way that serves all of us. That's what we're trying to build at Bronze. It's about justice and joy. There's enough in the economy for everyone to get theirs. And not only that, but for us to actually be happy, like joyful, like we can build that. So I'm okay with things breaking. I'm looking forward to breaking them. I might even be breaking stuff myself because we want to get to that near future.